Hey guys, TC Mabe here. Wanted to get this video to you for the Orc Randomizer. As you saw in my demo video earlier, I have a couple of different orcs that are from this this pack, and I forget the guy's name now, but we can go look at it real quick. It's the one we were discussing in there, the 13 Orcs pack. Let me just look real quick. I want to make sure I give credit to the designer of this thing because it is a beautiful asset. So the 13 Orcs pack is what we're dealing with, and the person who wrote this, his name is Bogramov Maxim. Okay. You can also find him on CG Trader. He has other models that aren't currently available in the Unreal Engine marketplace that are really nice as well. So anyway, getting back to this, what we're going to do is we're going to give you an overview of the general idea and the concept. We're going to look at the blueprints and how to set up the variables and all that kind of stuff and get the framework running. And then we're going to talk about the replication of the variables to the server for a multiplayer environment. And then we're going to talk about duplication and building the other multiple orcs. So this will be a little bit of a longer video, but it should address quite a few things and hopefully help you out with whatever you're working on. So the first thing in here, what we're going to do is we're going to go take a look at the general structure of one of his characters. So he has a thing here called the Orcs pack, and it comes in and it has animations built into it, various animations in here. And then he also has a map in here which explains the overview of all the different types of orcs that you have. And in each folder, you have a subfolder in here for each one of the orcs. So in here I have an Orc 2, an Orc 3, 4, 5, 6. Then he has types of orcs like an Azrak, Customed, Darden, etc. This generic NPC animation, that's not part of his package. I added this in because I wanted to give these guys some background stuff to do later on in a thing I'm working on. Now, what I did is, just to get this up and running, I took their common skeleton, which is in this Orcs pack, and using their common skeleton that's in here, I think I'm kind of not really remember where he's at, might be under Orc 2 Mesh. One of these has it. It's real easy to find it if you just go to Orcs pack and you just put on under your filter. You can go under here and look for Skeletal Mesh, or actually you can go under Animation Skeleton, and it'll pull up all the different skeletons. So there's an Orc Skeleton in here that's under Orcs pack Animation and then Mesh. So it's actually this one right here. So this common Orc Skeleton, what I did is I went into that Orc Skeleton and I created all of the different bones that are required to work with the ACF setup. So you got the left shield, weapon, and bow hand, and then he's got all of his own little things on here, and I added in the additional ones that all come from ACF. So you can get this from your source mannequin, just copy and paste them to the relevant bone locations to get him all ready to go. And the reason I did this is because then you can go into the retarget manager, you set him up as a humanoid, he's got the same rig that the ACF's character is using, so now I can retarget all of the animation blueprints onto this character. And if you look in the anim BP for him, which is just getting him up and running, this particular anim BP instance is just really a duplicate of the animation sample that comes with ACF. And the reason I'm doing this individually for each one of these guys, I'm going to have an Orc 2 anim set, an Orc 3 anim set, an Orc 4 anim set, and each one of these guys, under their common actions for each of the montage values and things like that, I'll be able to set them up with their own animation groups and their own different behaviors and things like that to give them even more randomization, so that when you're in combat with them, they don't all play exactly the same. Okay, so I'm going to have 13 different blueprints for their functionality that way. It's not required, but it's just something I'm doing. But if you set them up the right way in the first place, retargeting the animations onto them is very easy. Now that you have them retargeted, what you're looking at in here, go back into this section in here, you're going to have an RT Anims folder. If you follow any of my retargeting process videos, basically it's the exact same thing. And you're just going to assign this into whatever blueprint you're working on, which we'll talk about in a second. But if we look at the Orc 2 pack, he has all these different meshes. Now ignore these blueprints up here because that's for something else we'll talk about towards the end of this video. All of the skeletal meshes that are in here can be attached using various methods inside of your blueprint. Your weapon is by default coming in as a static mesh. So if you actually want this to be an ACF weapon, you have to turn this into a skeletal mesh. And so what I do is I create a folder inside of my root folder for wherever I'm working, and I create that as an import folder. And all you do to make this work is you would just right click on this guy and say Asset Actions Export. And when you export this, you're going to export it out into the import folder of wherever the character is that you're bringing this in for. So it's going to actually treat it as a brand new FBX. And when you do that, it'll say, would you like to, you'll see a little pop-up here that says, would you like to import this into your engine? You say yes. Now you can import it and tell it to create a skeleton for it. And Unreal Engine will automatically build a skeleton. So now I have a duplicate copy of that weapon that's now a skeletal mesh. And in my skeletal mesh, if I go in here, I can go and create, well, my orc weapon, I can go in here and I can define sockets for like the handle portion of this. And then I've got the start of the spikes up to the end of the spikes. And in your asset combat framework, there's a manager in here for when you build an item that you can specify that these different ranges do different damage. So I have it if you get hit with the handle, it's like a blunt force impact that does a certain amount of damage. And if you get hit with these spikes, then it's treated as a puncture or a, like a stabbing type wound would be created by this, like a cut damage or whatever. And so I can give them two different damage ranges depending on how they use the weapon. Again, not necessarily related specifically to what we're talking about with the randomization, but just something to consider when using this particular pack, how to build these additional things, okay? Now, for all the things that are in this camp of being a skeletal mesh that we want to randomize onto our character, I want to talk first about the structure of the blueprint and the process overview of how we're doing it. Then we're going to talk about the randomization aspect of it and how to turn that into variables for what we're trying to do. So under ACF example, blueprints, characters, you have all these different character types. I created an orcs folder, and I took a copy of the ACF sample enemy BP into that orc folder, which you could just do by dragging this over here and saying copy here, right? Once you get the copy in there, you're going to rename it. So in my case, I have an Orc2 random, and an Orc3 random, and an Orc2 boss, and an Orc3 boss. And the reason I have this set up this way is because my Orc2 boss, which is this guy here, he's going to wear, by default, all of the armor and the equipment, the items that are available to his group. So that specifies he's the leader of that clan, and these other guys have random pieces of armor put on them that they've picked up in various battles or whatever. But since he's the leader, he gets all the stuff. He's the toughest guy. And I can also control that and say he's got a higher level. He's his own independent entity. He could have his own move sets and specialty moves, etc. So that's why I'm doing that. Now, inside of my Orc2 random blueprint, all we're doing in here now, we would go and set our skeletal mesh to be whatever our common body is going to be for this group. So in this case, I have an Orc2 body on an Orc2 random blueprint. And I'm using the Orc2 Anim BP instance. So I have these all paired up. Orc2 random, Orc2 body, Orc2 Anim instance. Okay. Now, inside of here, the key that you want to look at inside the event graph, you're going to go in here and we're going to create some variables. And these variables are going to be placeholders for our different components. And we also can bring over the different types of attachments and things that this guy has here. Now, what we want to do, I've made this generic. So I've got just simply attachment 1, attachment 2, and then orc base armor 1, 2, and 3. So this would be like, if he's wearing, like leg guards or boots, or if he's wearing like a loincloth or chest plate or anything like that, that's all going to go under my base armor. And then other attachments would be like wrist guards or armbands or helms or, whatever. However you want to set this up is up to you. So this is just the way I'm envisioning it. Now this is just a skeletal mesh component that's been added in underneath of my primary mesh. And the way you do that is highlight this. You go to add component and you're just going to type in skell. And it'll bring you up a skeletal mesh. And you can dump a skeletal mesh in here and name it whatever you want to. This is going to be a placeholder for our character. You see there's nothing assigned to this. And there's no Anim BP class assigned to that either. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the thing that we want to put in there out of an array. And so down here we have these different components in our variables section. So we have an array called Orc1 Attachment, for example. And the way that you would create this is you just come over here and say, new variable, and you create, I'll just do it here. So let's say Orc1 and a 2 attachment. So if I wanted to do a third, I would say like go in here, Orc3 or Orc underscore attachment, and call it 3. Yeah, I think 3 is open. Now that I have my variable created, I go over here and I change my variable type. So what I want to have in here, the type of this is basically these are all skeletal mesh objects. So I would pull this up and I would type in skeletal and let it find skeletal mesh object or component or skeletal mesh here, and then pull up an object reference to a skeletal mesh. Now that I have that selected, over here on this little side, you can change the container type, and I'm going to just hit that little drop down and go down here and turn that into an array. And you can see now that I have an array. Okay. Now if I compile this, I get a spot to put these attachments in, and what I can do is if I hit plus, it'll now let me go and pick any skeletal mesh that's in my system to put into that array. Okay. That's one way of doing that. Now the way I do it is I go and I create and compile this, and I have a container now for my Orc3 attachments. What I do is I minimize this out of the way a little bit. I'm going to leave this right here. You can pull it over a little bit. And I would go into my Orc. So let's go to Orc3, or Orc2 rather. Go back down here into my Orc pack into Orc2. And I go up and put a filter on under different types, skeletal mesh and all that kind of stuff, and then it's going to give these little filter buttons. So if I just go to the root level of the folder and go for only skeletal meshes, I'm going to get all my different types of attachments that this guy can have on him. Okay. Now, if I want to create, let's say Orc3 attachments were going to be like these types of things, all you do is you click on the first one, click on the last one, and get yourself a collection of them. You can do this with a control select or shift select. You can grab this whole thing and drag it right over to this little box, and it's just going to go ahead and dump in every one of those objects for you into your array. Now, what would happen is, in this case, if I were to randomize and pick something out of here, since I have 5 items in this array, in theory, I have a 20% chance of gaining any of these 1 items, okay? If I want a chance to not get an item, all I have to do is add additional empty containers into the array. So in the case here, where I jack this up and say I have 20 different elements in my array, now, I only have like a 5% chance of gaining an item. And if I get a 5% chance of hitting an item, it's just one of these, okay? That way, if you had a larger cluster, like say you've only got 4 or 5 hats, you don't want everybody to have on a hat of the one or type or whatever. So you just put it in here and then just add additional things into it. Now that we have that as our array, what we're doing with our array is we're going to go over here and say we want to be able to get something out of that array to assign into this thing. And this is where we're not going to talk about the replication stuff yet. We're going to talk about this. So if I wanted to create an object in here, and don't worry about this stuff right here. Okay, the meat and the potatoes of it is a set skeletal mesh function. We're going to start with that. So I'll go back out here. So my thing would say, if I just right click, I'm going to say set skeletal mesh, and this is going to pull it up. And I just want to set a skeletal mesh, and the target of this is wherever I'm going to place the thing. So if I wanted to place an attachment 3 on my orc, I would want to go up here and say, highlight my mesh, add component, scale. And now see this says multiple assets. The reason it says multiple assets, and you don't want to do that, the reason it says multiple assets is because out here in this other window, we accidentally still have all these selected. So you want to deselect those. Otherwise, you're going to create a weird array of objects inside of there that you won't be able to deal with in an elegant way. So I'm going to go back, add component, and we're going to say scale mesh, and it's going to give me a blank one, and I would just say attachment underscore 3, and we want to make these generic, and I'll show you why in a second. Then you can move this up into your up into your cluster here if you want to. It's still going to be under the mesh, but we want to just move it up maybe to fit. I don't want to drop it there to attach. I thought I moved these up earlier. It's not really important, but they should be out. Can I out jog it from there? Okay, wherever it lands, okay. Attachment underscore 3, it might reorganize itself later on. Attachment 3 would be our target. So if I drag this out, I can just replace my mesh with that target. So we go targeting attachment 3 in this example. And when we go to get our new mesh, we could select an asset. But what we want is one of the meshes that's in our array. So if we pull out our Orc attachment 3, we can say we want to get that attachment. And what we want to do is come out of here, and we're just going to say get, a copy from this array. And right now this is at element 0. Well, I want to randomize which one of those things I'm getting from attachment 3. So we want to get a random integer within range. So a random integer in range has a min and a max value. Well, the min is 0, right? Because we want the anywhere from the lowest number to the top number in this case. Now, if you had a different setup in here and you said, oh, well, I've only got 10 objects and the first 5 are like gauntlets and the last 5 are, pieces of chest mail. So for this, I want to randomize the range from 5 to 10. And on the other one, I want to range, from 0 to 4. You could certainly do that by specifying your ranges in here. I think it's a lot simpler if you just create a different array with whatever you want to have in it, but that's entirely up to you. So now that I have my random value, where I want to put my max is, I want to define this, but I don't ever want to say, let's see, I've got 20 elements in here, so I want to make my max 20. So 0 to 20 on this thing. Because later on, I might add one or subtract one from here. If I don't like the way a character's looking, I can just go over and delete this or add more things, for randomization. I don't want to have to come back and touch this. So what we do is we get the last index out of the array. So we just drag off of here, and we just say last index. And we're going to plug our last index value into our max. Right? And our min is now 0 to a max of whatever the last item is in this array. If I put another 10 items in here, my last index is 30. If I take 10 out of there right now, my last index is 10. So this automatically grows with my choices that I make in here, and I don't ever have to worry about touching this again. So now our return value coming out of here is going to go into the get side of this. So what am I getting? In this case, I'm getting the 0th element of this array, but over here I'm picking a random number, so this is going to replace my 0. And in essence, what's happening here is I'm saying go get an element from the array that's somewhere between the first item, which is 0, all the way out to the last item, which is the max index value, and return that number back to me, and then provide that number as my new mesh. Okay? And if you were to run this off of an execution pin, like randomized character or whatever, you create a function to run that, you're going to randomize a value here, and you're going to set that skeletal mesh on the target of attachment 3, which is on this character. Well, attachment 3, if you look on here, each one of these different things has a different setup. Attachment 3 is just another placeholder for an object in here. I'm going to show you that in just a second with a different character, but you'll understand why in just a second when I create these. Now, we're going to go a little bit further into the weeds here. Hopefully you understand this so far. If not, pause the video, think about it a little bit, or rewind it. Again, we're just populating an array of items with our known values that fit this character, and then we're going to go and create a placeholder for it and pass that value up to this attachment. Okay? That's all that's happening. And we're doing it here with the set skeletal mesh. Now, if I wanted to set the Orc3 attachment, that's great. If I want to change this, I could just copy this and paste another one in. And I would come over here and say, well, now I want to target attachment 1. So let me pull my attachment 1 value out here. And instead of using my Orc attachment 3 array, I want to use my Orc attachment 1 array. So I'd pull this over, get Orc attachment 1, and I can just start to replace these values in the pins. So now I can just go boom, boom, and delete this. And now all of a sudden, this is randomizing to set the skeletal attachment 1 from an array of Orc attachment 1, which is populated with whatever I put into Orc attachment 1. So in this case over here, same type of objects, but you get the idea. Different ones here. So then, to make these work together, you just start daisy chaining these together. So set the skeletal mesh for the Orc attachment 3, set the one for attachment 1, set the one for his body, set, whatever you're doing. So that's the general idea of it. Now, from a multiplayer replication standpoint, what you end up doing with these, and we're going to show you this in a minute, in a replicated environment, what you're going to do is randomize whatever your value is, and then you're going to pass it to a variable and set that in a different function. And we'll talk about that in just a sec. But I'm going to use one of these. I don't need them both. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to show you how that works using this one here with my attachment 3 that's not currently in use. Okay, so we'll come back to that for the networking side of it. What I want to talk about now is that's how we randomize our armor and attachments. So then we want to talk about randomizing our color. So same thing, randomizing the colors for the mesh or the attachment 1 or attachment 2. Excuse me. And these are the same, same targets up here. We have a function that we created called Color Randomizer. And I know they said this was simple, and it got way more complex when I started turning it into multiplayer replicated. But just bear with me and follow along. I think you'll be able to do this, and I have a little something for you here at the end of this. So Color Randomizer, you pick what your source material is going to be. So in this case, the body or the armor, you know. And so we go in here, we get the Color Randomizer function. What this is doing, let's disregard these print string values. This is just for troubleshooting. And don't worry about this switch has authority and set with notify, all that kind of stuff. We're going to talk about this in the replication part. But just think of it this way. We have a variable that we created which is called tone. Okay? And our tone of the character is going to be a range somewhere between a min and a max tone. And what we're doing in here, same thing with this one, we have another function section called create dynamic material instance and set vector parameter values that need to be set up, and we'll talk about this in a minute. This was originally connected together off of like a begin, and then the value for this tone was being provided from this little function here that says go and get a random floating range somewhere between my tone min and tone max value, which I have set at 0.7 for the min and 1.5 for the max. So 1 is your normal, right? So I'm doing 30% less than normal and 50% above normal. That's my range. Somewhere slightly off normal and somewhere slightly above normal. And you can tweak this to get a tighter tolerance range or a wider tolerance range. So if you want guys to come out being orange and yellow and all that kind of stuff, you can widen up the gap for these, or you can also dip your tone min level down closer to 0. And your higher range up, closer to like 2 or 3 or whatever, and see what you end up with. But basically, here's how that's set up. So tone min and tone max are just floats, and you take out of the tone min into the min of each of the random floating ranges, and then the max into the max of each of the random floating ranges, and the resulting values of those go into a make color RGB value, and come up and give you back the value of tone. Now, normally this plug would have gone into the input side of this value to set the vector parameter value. Create dynamic material instance and then set the vector parameter using a randomized value from this tone min and tone max and make color. If you weren't playing a multiplayer game, you could literally out in your event graph, you could build something like this out in your event graph, or I'm sorry, something like this out in your event graph to just randomize your tone. And what that would look like is if I took these objects here, I want to get this one too. If I took these objects here, copy those out to my event graph, and this is all just demo stuff, so if I had those out there, then the color randomizer functions that are here, and I copied these out to here, what we would have is, instead of setting a variable there, we would just replace that with this value here. So get rid of that. So this would normally be in a single player game. You just run an execution pin into this. So like go set all my skeletal meshes like I did up here. In the original version of this, when we were talking about it, the set skeletal meshes were all down here off of a branch or a sequence rather, and all of the ones up here were randomizing the colors of those. And this function was just in line here several times. And it just looked like this. Now, what we did to make things a little bit easier is you could take this and highlight the whole thing and collapse it down to a function. And that's what we did. When you collapse it to a function, you basically get all this stuff in a collapsed little call, and you can pass values into it. That's a different topic, okay? But in a multiplayer environment, you're gonna process this in one spot and update a variable, and then you're gonna update that variable value in another spot, okay? And don't worry too much about what's going on here just yet, because we're gonna, like I said, at the end of this, I'm gonna have something for you. So that's the general idea of it, though. Randomize these things using these values and pass them over, and then there's your placeholders. So now let's talk a little bit, I guess, about the networking side of this. Whenever you want to network something in a replicated environment, you're going to have variables, that you're sending to the server. And your variable is going to be coming from one of these types of placeholders or one of these up here. Now, if I created a variable for this, so let's say I want to turn this into a something I'm going to pass onto a server. What you do is you break this. You just delete that, and you've got two separate things going on now, and this needs a value. So if you just drag out of the pin, you can say promote to a variable, and it's going to get a variable name. And I could highlight this and say, whatever this is going to be. So I'm going to say, my tone value or whatever it is, something generic. So my tone value, if you highlight that now, you get a chance over here for replication, and you say you want to do, instead of replicated, you want to say a rep notify. Now, a rep notify will create its own little function over here called on rep notify or on rep my tone value. Okay. So what we do here, now that that's a rep notify, and we're going to set that value there, what we can do over here is we can grab my tone value and drag it out into the world and set my tone value. Okay. And it creates a new thing called set with notify. So set with notify is just looking for my tone value, which I can return from here. The way I used to do it up here, I can just do right here now. And what this would do, if I were to run an execution pin into this, it would say set with notify whatever my random color is from the tone min and max, and then promote that to this replicated variable called my tone value. And then in the function call for this, remember we broke this apart? I'm going to hit Control X. I would go into on rep my tone value, double click that. I come back in here and just hit Control V and paste it in. And I can now just wire that up. And basically what you have now, and I normally end these, you don't have to do this, but I normally end these with a return to just let everybody know that this is over. You just add a return note in there. But basically what happens is when you fire the execution pin of setting this, so like if this was like a custom function or whatever, add a custom event called like update tone, and if I called that, I would just run it here. So update tone is going to hit this set with notify and go and get those values, and then it's going to pass this variable onto this function. This function is then just going to replicate its value into this replicated variable. And the server now, in a minute, we're going to call that, the server would take this variable and push it out there because it's a rep notify. It already knows what to do with it. Okay, so that's a little bit of explanation about how that works. And I'm going to show you how you get all this magic to happen using this process. Hopefully I'm not losing you guys. I know this I said it was simple, and it was simple until it became not simple. So hopefully that makes sense. Go back here to this event graph. So if I were to run this now, I'm going to get rid of these for a minute because we don't need any of this stuff really. I'm just showing you how you create them once you get into there. So I'm going to take my tone value and I'm going to delete that. Doesn't need to be there. And I'm also going to get this on rep tone value out of there too. We don't need that. So I'm going to delete both of those. Now, let's go up here and talk a little bit about how all this is getting called. So, in our normal ACF AI character blueprint, we just have a little section here under the event graph that says event begin play, event begin parent play, or parent begin play. So coming out of that execution pin, we just run this thing that says switch has authority. Now, switch has authority doesn't necessarily mean switch who has authority. What it means is it's a switch that wants to know who has authority. Based on who has authority or what your authorities are, do something different. If you ever want to see what's inside of one of these, like you see this, you just double click on that and it'll take you into it and you can read it. So it takes an input to a branch, just a normal branch of a true and false. It finds out if the actor running this has authority, and if they do, it's true, and it outputs that they have authority. If it's false, they don't, and it outputs that they're remote. Okay? That's all that's doing. But it's just encapsulated into a little function call. So we come out of here and we say, is the person who's asking me to begin playing this, do they have the authority to run something on a server? And if the answer is yes, that they do have that authority, we're going to ask them to go and randomize our orcs multi, which is a function down here, right? Now we created this, just like we did earlier. I right click and I say, create new function or whatever. I say custom function rather. So add custom event. Sorry, I'm saying function is really an event. So this is just whatever I want to call it. When I create a custom event, I also get the chance to replicate this. And I have different types of replications. So one thing is just to run something on a server. One thing's to run it on an owning client. But in this case here, it's a multicast. Now what a multicast does, this is our multicast. And it's also promoted as reliable. So let me explain that a little bit. A multicast event is saying, I'm the server and I have the authority to control the game and what everybody else knows about what's going on in the game. So I am going to multicast or cast these results out to everybody who's plugged into the system. That's all multicast is doing. And reliable, if you hover over there, it probably tells you what it does. But reliable basically means that it definitely gets updated and it's forced into play. So it's like a high priority thing. You definitely want to do this if you're doing something like firing a bullet at somebody or whatever. Now in here, let's go back. Our event begins to play. Am I able to run this on the server? Am I the server who started up this? If I am, just go right down here and run Randomized Orcs multi. And then, so basically at this point right here, since we're the multicast, we've already switched on or verified we have the authority, so we can just run this. So this is going to go through and randomize our mesh, randomize our attachment, and it's going to push each of those variables up to these little functions in here for these on reps, right? So these are all going to get automatically updated. And then after it gets done doing that, the sequence node goes down and hits branch number 2 and does the same thing with all the different pieces of armor. Okay. And then the other piece of this call is if I don't have the authority, which I'm just a remote guy, so I'm a player and I don't own the server. And the reason you do this is because you could cheat a game by saying, I just fired 100 arrows at your character, you're dead, right? Well, the server, I can only ever ask the server to fire an arrow. I can never tell the server that I'm firing 1,000 arrows unless that's something that's a function I can do. I can say call the fire 1,000 arrows function. But I can never say I just fired 1,000 arrows. I have to say to the server, I'm trying to fire 1,000 arrows, and the server says, yeah, that's something you can do. Go ahead. Or no, you can't. Okay, and it manages all the operations for you. Now, if I'm a remote player, I get to call Randomized Orcs on server. So server over here, Randomized Orcs on server is another type of replicated environment, and this one runs on the server as reliable. And then the server can call Randomized Orcs multi, which takes you down here. So here's what I'm saying. If I'm the server, go randomize the orcs and push it to all the players. If I'm a client, go ask the server to randomize the orcs and push them to the clients. That's all you're doing. I'm asking for the server to do it here. Here I am the server and I'm telling it to do it. That's the only difference. Okay. Now, that will randomize these items and get them onto these characters. So you're going to set up in your variables what I would do just to get your feet wet with what I have here and replicate this. I shouldn't say replicate, duplicate this into your own environment just to get your feet around or your head around what I'm doing here. So create a variable called attachment 1 and 2, orc base armor 1 and 2 and 3, and attachment. This can go away. We're not actually doing anything with this. So let's delete that. Let's not complicate my life. And then down here under your variables, you're going to have these different containers, which I said again you can set up as an array of skeletal meshes for attachment 1 and 2, base armor 1, 2, and 3, and then your orc base armor 1, 2, and 3, attachment 1 and 2. This can go away. We're not using orc attachment 3s. Okay. And then you're going to, as I said earlier, you're going to save this and then just pull items into your array from the groups that are in your defined area. Then the beauty of this whole setup is this. And there's one piece that you don't know yet, which is how to set these in the proper orientation for your character. So I want to talk about that real quick. So once you get these all laid in, I'm going to show you how to set these up so you know that they're in the right orientation in just a second also when we do the next one. I'm going to do one with you here. When we are done doing what we're doing here and we want to push this out and keep our character together, we have another graph in here that we want to look at, which is called, where's it at? Event begin play. There should be a function out here for, let me see if I can see it. Where's it at? There should have been a, construction script. Yeah, there's usually a construction script out here. So if you don't see that, just double click it and pull it up. So what the construction script is doing, same thing. It's got a construction script and a parent construction script. We're going to use something called set master pose component. And you just literally right click out here and just type in set master pose component on the mesh. And then actually you can target any one of these that you want to, except for the mesh. That's fine too. And what it'll do, well, let me just build it. So say set master pose component. And even if you pick mesh, that's fine. What you want to do is actually, instead of targeting the mesh is actually going to be what the new master pose component is. And the target is any one of these things that you're trying to put up there. So if you just grab all of your attachment points over here and drag these over, you just drop these off in your window, and then you're just going to connect each of these into this target, like so. And then you would just execute, directly into this. Now, what's it do? Why are we using it? Well, here's what this does. Set master pose component is saying, I don't want to have an animation blueprint for every one of my skeletal meshes to be playing the same animation. So imagine I'm wearing a piece of armor. My character bends, the armor needs to bend, right? The animation that's playing on my character has to also play on my skeletal attachments so that they move with my character and create the illusion that we're all one object. Without this, it's actually just a bunch of things that are connected together that they move independent of each other. So what the set master pose component does is it says whatever animation you're playing on, whatever this master bone is, in this case the whole mesh, also play that on the base armor 1 and base armor 2 and base armor 3 and the attachment 1 and 2. Also play that on here. These are the targets of whatever animation is being received for this thing. And I'm forcing the update on it. Okay? So now that you hopefully got your head wrapped around some of that, it's a lot of stuff to take in. I said easy, it got complicated a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to go up here and we're just going to put it into practice. So let's go to our blueprint. And in our blueprint for our character orcs, we have an Orc2 random, and I had an Orc3 random, but let's go build our Orc4 random. So I'm going to duplicate this. We're going to go Orc4 random. So after you get this built, here's how easy this is to work with now. We go Orc4 random. Let's go look at our Orc4 random real quick. Let's kind of get our head wrapped around his structure. So let's get rid of these. They're not in our way. Orc4 has a blueprint where it explains his structure, and it also has all these meshes. Now these meshes, again, I like to filter for skeletal meshes. If I look at this, he's got a pretty simple layout, right? He's got a belt, he's got a shoulder strap, he's got some arm bands, some legs, and a couple of other things. So really all I would do with this guy is I treat these as a couple different attachments. I might say in one of my attachments, I'm going to put his belt, and maybe I want all of my guys to have this minimum of a sash on or something, or this cloth. So I could put, let's say they all have a sash, some of them have a belt, some of them have a shoulder thing, whatever. So I treat these as like 3 separate attachments or 2 separate attachments. And I can go in here and randomize this and put additional things in that they may or may not have these. Okay. Now this is also an attachment which goes on his back or his shoulder, so you can put that in there too. I think you probably don't want to do that with this, because if I were randomizing a bunch of guys and all of them had this thing on there, it kind of looks kind of hokey, but you could certainly make this like 1 out of 100 or something gets one of these if you want to do a horde. So let's just go ahead and set it up. So we got this all in here, and this is a weapon, so we don't want to put that in there. We're going to turn that into a weapon. All right, so Orc4 has a couple different things here. So let's go into our Orc4 blueprint again. And we have a Orc4 mesh in here. Take that out. So in our Orc4 mesh, he also has this Orc4 body. So we got to remember that. So let's go back into our blueprint for our Orc4 random guy. And all we have to do to start this, we go into our, there should be a view, window, viewport. You don't normally in there. So the first thing I do is I go to my mesh and I go to my skeletal mesh and I'm going to go in here and get my Orc4 body. So I type in body and I go down and I look for Orc4 body. So he looks a little bit different, right? Now in this case here, I'm going to use the same animation blueprint because I haven't retargeted all these yet. You guys will do whatever you want to. You could use your common one for every one of them. They're all just going to do the same thing. I recommend duplicating the entire pack, which includes all the montages at least. And then you could keep the animations common, but you need separate montages because you're going to redefine what animations are in those montages with different triggers. Slightly different topic. But I'm going to go in here, Orc Anim instance. So this is their different animation instances. So I'll just put it on the Orc base animation instance. And it's going to play the same thing because that's what it does. So I've got my mesh identified as the Orc4 body and the same animation instance for all these other ones. Now what I want to do is if I go over to, I'm going to just close this back for a second. If I go back over to the blueprint for, remember I said there's a blueprint in Orc4? This guy has a list of all the things that are attached to that character. Armor legs, armor arms, beard, belt, belt one, cloth, weapon, hood, skull, and skeletal mesh attachment. And if you look in the viewport on here, I don't know why it's not staying open, but if you look in the viewport in here, that's what all these different things are. Armor legs, right? Armor legs, so on and so forth. Boom, 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 boom. Now, I've already set these up, but if I didn't have this on my character, what I could have done is I could have grabbed these, okay? And actually, what is a skeletal mesh? I don't know what that other skeletal mesh is right there. Doesn't say. So I'm just gonna grab these. I'm not sure what that other one is. I can hit Control C and copy that, right? And if I went into my orc over here to see what his attachments would look like, you could actually put these. Just right click on this mesh and just say paste, and it'll bring those attachments in. Okay. And now that I see that they're coming in, now I've already done this with the other ones that are in here, but what I had to do the first time was I've got all these things. I've got multiple location values and rotations. Every one of these should be at location 0, which should pull all those down. And then the multiple values here, these should be at, I think it's, let's go 0, 0. No, that's a different thing. Let's go, this should be -90, I think it is. No, that's the wrong rotation. Something's wrong here. I got a different thing on here than what I had in the earlier ones. That's 0, 0. That should have, oh, it's because they're, I'm sorry. Disregard what I'm saying here. Let's go Control Z, move that back some. All right, these guys here, the reason that's doing that is because they're not attached over here and they're not put into the same, let me zero this back out. Yeah. It's because they're nested like this. So what we want to do is we would pull these up to our mesh and that's going to flatten them all out. So now I think I can grab all those. This weapon really shouldn't be in there either. I'll delete the weapon. So if we went in here, first time around, grab all these different things, right? And then we could take and change our multiple values. So let's try zeroing out our Z. That pulls them down now. And also zero out this, and I think that turns them all around. So now that's how you would line them up. They have to be nested under the mesh and all at the same flat level. The other ones were bringing them children. But if you look at this, what you see is, see how I was saying earlier? If I compile this, he's moving independently of those other items. Okay? To fix that, that's where you go into this construction script. And in this case here, that's not what's on there. So let's, I'm trying to show you how these work. And also I already have things here. So hopefully this is not confusing the shit out of you guys. I apologize if it is. But what we would do is to set, for that guy there, we just say set master pose component. And, you know, like I said earlier, you pull this in. I'm just going to replace this one temporarily, bypass this and come over to here to my new one. So we would take this mesh. That's going to be our new master bone component. Get rid of this as the target. And the thing we're targeting would really be these items here, which we would now pull over and say, target that and that. And what I've done is I've changed this around for you to make this easier. I don't have these things anymore. What I have is attachment 1, attachment 2, base armor 1, 2, and 3, right? So I've variabilized all these into common things. That's why I did it. So I don't have to manage this pile of nonsense for every one of these. But I'm showing you how this works so that you get your head around it. And then if I come out of here into the master pose component, if I could connect 2 lines, when I compile this, let's go back to the viewport. When I compile this, what you should see is that these things all slap together now. See that? Set master pose component is passing the animation data onto that common character. Everything that's happening to the base of this is also being applied to the other one, so it's what keeps all that together. And in ACF, when you're running this, that's what's going to keep your character together when you do flips and combat and all that kind of stuff. So set master pose component is the big deal. Now I don't need that on here because on here I'm going to be setting the master pose component of our base armor 1, 2, and 3. I just need to define what they are. So let's go back over and we're going to take a look at, remember I had this all kind of set up to be fairly generic. So what we can do is, let me get rid of all this other stuff I just added in. This is all nonsense. It's just an example. Okay, but we're going to have our attachment 1, 2, base armor 1, 2, and 3, or whatever you decide. So all I need to do now to fix this all is I would come in, Orc attachment 1. I just got to go figure out what I want that to be. So they're not going to be these because these don't go to that guy. So we go in here, we go delete, and I'm going to go Orc attachment 2, delete, base armor 1, delete, because this is defined by me for this character separately now. All right, compile that. Now I'm going to shrink this up a little bit, minimize this down, and come over here to where I can get back to my folders. And I'm going to go Orc3 Skeletal Meshes. And I like to put these, when I'm working in here side by side like this, I like to go over here and change my view options at the bottom of this. This is a very long video. My view options. And I like to go over here and say, put these into a list for me just so I can see them over here a little bit better. And then I also take and I blow my scale up some so I can see what I'm dealing with. Now what I'm going to do is, and all these go to 0 position, so it doesn't matter. So if I want my characters all to have something on, like this skeletal mesh, I would go to Orc base armor 1. And I'm saying every one of these guys is going to have on this, and let's say at a minimum they're going to be wearing, let's just do that, just a loincloth. So I'll drag the loincloth over to base armor 1, and I'm not going to have anything else in there, so there's a 100% chance they're going to get a loincloth when I randomize that variable. If I wanted it to be the 50% chance for the loincloth, I would have an empty one in here and let it pick. 33% chance I'd put 3, etc. 25% chance you put 4. So that's just math over here. I'm going to go on to the next one. I'm going to say, okay, for base armor 2, maybe I want to have a choice between either having a belt and arm guards, let's say. So I don't want them to have both. Maybe I just want to have a belt or arm guards. Or maybe I want to have maybe a belt or a sash. Let's do that. We'll do a belt or a sash. Not both. Belt or a sash, and sometimes nothing. Whatever we put in there. Sometimes no things. Belt or a sash or nothing. Go on to my next one for base 3, and I would say, okay, well, let's see, base 3. Maybe I always want them to have on, let's say, boots. Well, or, boots or no boots. So let's go boots or no boots. Random chance of wearing shoes. Okay. And compile that. And then for my attachment 1 and 2, let's say that that's going to be either a hood or these arm things, and sometimes nothing. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put these variables into our container. We're going to compile that. And now if we go and look at our viewport, compile this guy, when we run this over here on the server side, that's all done. That's pretty much all we would need to do there. We've put in our random attachments for his array. And we've got him set up with his base and his thing here. So if I just go over here now, back to the blueprint side for the character. Oops, characters. And the downside of switching that around is you also, I'd like to work with this other one in tiles. So here's my Orc3 random guy, or Orc4 random, sorry, that we just made. So let's go ahead and put a couple of him out here. So there's the first one. And if you don't know how to do this, moving around with your, I've got my right mouse button and I'm moving around. If you take your mouse wheel and you scroll that towards you, scrolling your mouse wheel towards you slows your camera panning down. And if you push it forward, it'll speed it up, okay? So I'm going to give myself a little bit different view here. And now if I hold down the Alt key when I click on this, I click this guy, hold down the Alt key, I can just drag this off. Let go of the Alt key, click the Alt key again, drag this off. Let go of the Alt key, drag it out again, let it off. So there's my guy. Now, they don't have any weapons, but they're there. So when I hit play, oh, they do have weapons. All right, it got sneak attack there. Let's go take their weapons off of them so that they don't kick my ass. I'm going to show you how to put weapons on there for ACF at the end of this. I forgot I added weapons to the ones that I duplicated. So weapons, weapons for the guys are going to be in the equipment component with their default starting weapons. So in here, these guys had health potions and a spiked club. I'm going to get rid of their spiked club. They can keep their health potions, that's fine, but they can't kill me with a health potion. At least not that I'm aware of. All right, so there's that. Now they're still going to come over and gang up on me. But let's zoom out a little bit and see what we got going on here. Oops, sorry guys. So if I go look at that now, every one of them has on a hood. Some of them have on belts. Looks like the one guy, let's take him over here in the light a little bit better. Over here. Yeah, but you can see they're different skin tones, right? Same guy, 3 different skin tones. And some of them are wearing a belt. One guy's wearing a little sash across his chest. Right? Just different looks for the same guys. If I hit escape and hit Alt P again to play, I should see the same thing happening over here. So let's go over here. Yep, some guys have on hoods. Some guys don't. They all have slightly different variations. Some guys are wearing belts. Right? And you can tweak this however you want to. If I've got too much of a variation in there, you know, all I got to do is go and change the amount of variables that are in it, you know. And like I'm looking here, and like I said, the shoe thing. If I wanted them to have a better chance of having shoes, because they're not really. The last couple times I rolled it, I didn't see shoes. I would just go back in here and look at my variables for my array. And I go, okay, that's the hood and the attachments for the arms. No attachment to base armor. So there's my shoes. What I would do is I could just go and delete this and add back in the shoes, which were, I don't remember where they were at. But they're easy to find. You go Skeletal Mesh, turn the Skeletal Mesh on, go back down to your Orc4 folder. And there's they're actually called legs. Drop the legs in there and hit compile. And I just go back out and hit run. Now they should all have on legs. And they do. Let me pull it back out here. See that? Now all the guys have on the legs. This is probably easier if I blow this up so you can see it. Oh, sorry guys. Really sorry. That's why there was only 3 guys the first time, because I killed them right away. So see that? And again, you could go and make. Now when I change these all over to replicated variables, I may have caused some other issues here with randomizing. I was at one point randomizing the shades or the tones of their loincloths and armor also, but I'm going to put that in as a separate variable in here to make that all work. But you can certainly see that these guys appear to be. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. I'm lying to you. I'm looking at their skin and I'm thinking, man, they're really jacked up looking characters. So here's one thing that's really super important. When I created this into a function, I'm glad I saw that, because that would have jacked you up so hard. When I turned this into a function, I actually forgot that my character value, this is super important. Sorry for this. So glad I caught this for you. In your Orc3 random, my God, you have meshes that are defined in here for the bodies and the armors of these guys. Okay? So in here, every one of these guys is like Orc2, 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 and these are all armor, and this is all body. So what you want to do, since this is Orc4, you have to change these. I may, source material. This would be better for you at some point to just turn this into a variable that you could just specify, and it would just propagate to all these. But we're kind of in the beginning of this, so we would just go over here and go, should just be called 04 body. So Orc 04 body would go in there. And over here, this is 04 armor. So you should just be able to go in here and punch in 04 armor. And here's a trick for you. So now that I got the first one, and these are all the same, if you just hit the magnifying glass, technically what's happening in the background is I've just browsed to this. I could go to the next one and just hit this arrow, and because that's selected in the background, it's automatically going to pull it forward. So this is actually using whatever's selected in the browser. So I use the first one to find it, and the second one to apply it. See that? Simple. Again, turning these into variables would have been smarter, but I wasn't thinking about all that earlier. And now we could go back to our character. And in theory, why isn't that propagating that variable? Oh, you know what? They probably... Yeah, hold on. Orc4 body. Weapon hair. They've got a couple different things going on here, so but still Orc4 body should be the right thing. Maybe that's just what Orc4 body looks like. That's kind of strange to me, but let's open this up and see. I haven't really looked at Orc4 body. Shouldn't be quite that bad. The answer to it, that is Orc4 body. So let's go back to the process I'm talking about works. We just got to get the right material. But if we go back to Orc4 body in his actual blueprint, this is individual or independent of anything else we've ever done here. And we look at him in the viewport. He's supposed to look like that. So why is that other material being applied to that character? Orc4. I've lost myself here a little bit. Let's just say. Oh, here's because his material's here. We want to go here and say Orc4 body. I forgot to pick this. Orc4 body pile. Let's see if that changes it. No. What am I putting on these guys? Orc4 body. And Orc4 element 0. Sorry for this, you're getting into some live troubleshooting here. Event graph. This is doing the randomization to his mesh. I'm not passing any other variables there. I go into set with notify. Okay. So it's actually happening all the way down inside of the function. I changed it out on the front side, and I need to change it here also. So we're gonna in a future improvement of this, we would add in variables to handle all this. Source material. We would call it body material, armor material would be our variables, and then we would set those values and then just propagate it out. I'm going to change it right here, though, for now. So Orc4 body. If I could type. So Orc4 body, compile. That's going to change his body tone. And then in each of these, in the color randomizer event graph. That's why this is not working the way that it used to. It's because in the actual color randomizer graph that goes out to the set with notify, it's only changing the dynamic material instance, which is currently defined as body. So technically, my color randomizer, I need 2 of them. I need to make a new one just exactly like this, but it would be in the event graph, instead of calling this color randomizer, this should say body color randomizer, and the other one should be called armor color randomizer. So you could basically duplicate this and turn it into a new function. Pretty easy to do that. I'll take care of that, and I'll show you that in a separate video. This is already going on probably longer than it really needed to. But now that I've done that, those other changes probably didn't even matter nearly as much as this did. What we should have now is all their bodies are correct. Let's see, F11. Yeah. Now, let's go again and hit Alt-P. And are they getting different tones now? No. So now I got them with different attachments. Same tone. Could just be random though. Okay. Now, I'm glad I looked at that. I'm lying to you guys. The function that's changing their body color in this color randomizer is actually going in and modifying a variable called tone. And that variable is actually in the material of the character. So what we really need to do, and I forgot about this, I'm sorry. This is where all the magic comes from for the tinning in the first place. If you go down to the characters, and I'll go back to my Orc2 material, because I have it in here for his body and his armor. If I go into his body, you just have to put this little thing in here called tone and multiply. This is a parameter and a multiply. And your RGB value from the texture sample that's attached to base color just goes into the B side, and tone goes into the A as a multiply. And then we're changing the variable of it over on the other side, but this just has to be plugged into whatever your base texture sample is. So I'll show you. If we go copy that from here, and we go over to our Orc4 textures, or textures, materials, our Orc4 body, we could go in here, and we're going to go in and hit Control V and paste that in, and then all you're going to do is just change these wires where the RGB goes into B and the output of this goes into the base color. And then save that, which takes a second, because it's got to apply this to all the different things in there. And the same exact thing, you want to put that in the the body and in the armor. So while we're in here, we're going to do it to the armor. Drop this in, Control V. Move these up into position, coming out of the RGB into B and out of the value into base color. And save that and then close it. Making a hell of a video here, guys. Sorry for jacking you around with a couple different things, but I'm glad we figured it out here. Hopefully this will work now the way that it was supposed to. And you can change all these by tweaking these variables. Now, I said earlier in the video, I said I have something for you at the end of this anyway. What I'm going to do, I'll show you. Let's see if this works, and I'll show you what I'm going to do for you, because it'll make your life hopefully easier. Now we got different shades of the same guy, different color variations of the same guy. And sometimes he's wearing certain armor and clothes, and sometimes he's not. And what I said earlier still needs to happen, I believe, which is that we really want to apply that same process to the mesh for the armor and the equipment, but that has to be set up as a separate process now, because the whole parameterized function is only rolling through there. And if you're okay with them all having the same color clothes on and stuff, you don't have to do that. But for everything you want to randomize, their skin or their armor or their attachments should really be 3 separate functions. I originally had it as one, because I was controlling everything individually. But now that I'm replicating variables back up to the server, this becomes a little bit more important. If you were going to make one of these guys your master character, your master orc boss, let's do that real quick. So what we do there, we go back to blueprints and character orcs. And we would take our Orc4 random guy, we just duplicate him and say he's going to be called Orc4 underscore boss. We go into our Orc4 boss character. And all we have to do with this guy is we go into our construction script over here. Okay, so what we do with this guy, he doesn't need any of this type of stuff here to run because he's not getting randomized. Okay, so we don't need to randomize his values at all. So I would just take this right here, and this is again the orc boss instance. I'm just going to disconnect this pin, double left click on there and delete that. So on the begin play, none of this stuff will get fired. We're not randomizing anything about this guy at all. We don't need to worry about these attachments or anything. All you got to do with this guy is you go into his viewport. You can even take these attachments and just delete them because they don't need to be in there. And we do to this guy what we talked about earlier. We go, let's go out to Orc4 folder. And then you're going to go into the mesh section, get all the skeletal meshes. Or I'm sorry, easier, just go to the blueprint. Sorry. Go to the blueprint, double left click that, and in the blueprint, it has all the different things that go with this guy. So let's look at his viewport. The only one we don't want is this one called weapon, because we don't want to turn that into his weapon just yet. I'll show you how to do the weapon here in a second. So I would highlight all these and get rid of the weapon by holding down control. I'm going to hit control copy, go over to my Orc4 boss, highlight his mesh, and hit control V to paste it in. Drag all these up underneath my mesh to straighten them out. Go over here to my values under multiple values. I'll highlight that whole thing in there and change this to a 0. And then I'm going to come down here to the other multiple values here and turn that into a 0, and that orients everything. Then I go into my construction script, and while I still have all that stuff highlighted, I deleted the other ones. I just drag all these out, drop them off right here. And then I'm just going to plug every one of these into my target. So armor, target legs, and beards, and hats, and belts, and all that stuff. Everything that I want to have on this guy every time would go on here. Now, what I would also recommend is that this guy, since he's your main boss, he can have this this skull thing that rides around behind the character. And the other guy... Oh, wait a minute. One of these is not a... because I took this off. So set skeletal mesh. It's because I deleted all these. But again, on this one here, since he's your, because I set this up earlier, all these rep notifies are going to start barking about things. So all you got to do with these in your master character is just delete these functions. They don't need to exist on him. He's the boss. We're not randomizing him. We're not changing. If you want to randomize the boss, leave these on there and just do what you did in the other one and set the values of his parameters to be the one thing that you want to have on him, which for that to happen, you're really going to need multiple sections in there. We go back to this construction script. So that's all in there. We go to our viewpoint. We compile him. What I'm saying is this guy is the boss. So maybe he gets this and he uses it to rally up the rage in the other guys, And we want him to be maybe just a little bit beefier. So what I typically do is I just go to the mesh scale, and I'm just going to take this guy and jack him up to like 1.15. Maybe that's a little big. Maybe 1.05. So here he is at 1. Right? Just give him 1.05. Just tweaks him up just a little bit, make him look a little bit beefier than the other dudes. And if we take him now, he's static in a sense that if I populate my world with him, I can just come up here and get my... So let me back up because I went pretty fast here. To make him, I created a duplicate, wiped out all the variables, disconnected all the functions that are running variable things. That's the way I'm doing mine. And then I went to the original blueprint, copied all the mesh items that I wanted to out of his skeletal mesh components that are inside of the attachment level right here. Grabbed the ones I wanted, pasted them into his mesh, aligned them properly, which actually looks like, oh, because I've changed his size or whatever. Aligned them properly and then tweaked his movements a little bit, or his size. Okay, so I've got an Orc 4 boss now. I can come up here to my orcs, and I could take my Orc 4 boss. He's already got everything he needs. Just drop him out into the world, and we hit play. And now I've got one Orc 4 boss. And see how he's just a little bit bigger than the other guys? He's in control. Okay. Now, I said I'd show you how to make the weapon. So let's go back to our, and I'm really covering a lot in this video, but I hope it helps you guys. And I keep saying now, I'm going to show you, I got something for you at the end of this. Just hang in there. It's getting there. We're going to go back to our Orc 4. And we're going to go into the mesh folder. And our Orc 4 meshes has this Orc 4 weapon. Now this one, luckily, is already a skeletal mesh. The other one was a static mesh, and I showed you how to do that. So on here, all I got to do is Orc 4 weapon's already a skeletal mesh. So we go out to the weapon, we right click, say add socket. We're going to change the name of this socket to start. And then we're going to go and create another socket in here. Right click this and say add socket. And we're going to create a name here called end. And then usually I just leave my end socket highlighted. Go up here and grab my translate object tool and drag this up to the top of that. What ACF is going to do is it's going to draw a cylinder or whatever shape around this range and turn that into a damageable zone, so that if we get hit by that, we're going to take damage. So now that we have that, we're going to create a weapon out of it. So the easy way to do that is if you go into your blueprint items, and we'll just create, this is going to be a blunt bludgeoning type thing, but I don't have anything in there like that, so we'll just use the same I did for the spiked club. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to call this Orc 4. We'll call this like Skull Staff or something. Okay, Orc 4 Skull Staff. Just remember that name. So we go in here, and we're just going to go and get whatever that thing was called. And again, one of the tricks you can use in here with a lot of these. See how I've got this in 2 windows? I go back to Orc 4 meshes and I locate that staff, and I can either just drag it right into here to replace it, or I could have just hit this little glass, highlight it and then use that button to bring it over. It's easy to just drag it in. So I got my Orc 4 weapon in there, and now I can set up my ACF related stuff for it. And we go down here and we go into the ACM section. And I can delete that one because this one only has, actually we'll do this, we'll kill them all. Add one new set in here. And I'm just going to say staff. And remember, our start socket was called start. And our end socket is called end. And on this one here, our damage type is just going to be impact damage. And I'm going to give it a base of like, 25 points or something. And everything else that's in there pretty much should be okay. Except you have a spot way down in here under ACF that tells you all the different movement sets and the on-body socket names and where it gets attached. For this one, the default's probably okay. But really the answer to this is, I hate bouncing around here. The real answer to this guy is, if you looked at, remember when I was back in the Orc pack, if you looked at the skeleton, for the Orc Skeleton, and you go to the skeleton tree, there's attachments in here. And that Orc 4 guy that has that staff, there's probably a socket in here. See, there's the staff equip. So, really the name for the on-body socket is that staff equip right there. And when he puts it in his hand, You know, if it's being treated as a two-handed weapon or a heavy weapon, you could change all this in here also so that it looks right in his hand. So for now, we're going to say his on-body socket name is Staff Equip. And then when he grabs it, we'll see where it's at in his hand. So we go back here to the skull staff. So his on-body socket name is just going to be Staff Equip. Save this, compile it. Now we have defined our new item for the Orc Skull Staff. Well, how do we get it out into the world? Well, or how do we get it on him? We take this guy and we look at his blueprint. So let's go over here. This little pane, it just says Edit Orc4 Boss. We go into ACF's equipment component, and he's already got a slot in here for holding a weapon. Remember, I took these guys' swords off here. So for this guy, for Orc4 Boss, we're going to go in here and say that he has an item class of the Orc4 Skull Staff. Compile and save, and hit play. And he's going to start jacking me up right away. He just pulled his weapon out and see he's swinging at me. Let's get away from him here if we can. So we can see a look at him. See, he's dragging that staff and it's like really long. So really, the equipment socket for him should be way down a little bit further. Right. I have these guys all set at level 1 and I'm level 10. That's why I'm beating them pretty easily. But you would go in here, what's that? Equipped items, access done, trying to read property, calling function, get local ACF player character. Oh, that's from the HUD call, which we're not interested in worrying about that for a second. Maybe not even ever. Excuse me. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a socket on that guy. Or actually just stick his staff on a preview socket and see where he's at. So let's go back to our skeleton. And back to our skeleton specifically within the orc pack. Find the orc skeleton. And to do this, so here's his staff equip. If you right click on here and say add preview asset, his asset was called just Orc4. Orc4. Can I blow these up a little bit? It'd be easier to see his staff. So Orc4 weapon. So when it's on his back, it's going to be equipped there. And we don't like that. So what we would do is we could actually change the socket position for staff equip by going over here, and we're just going to take this and push this up. And in theory, this guy probably, he's got all those other bones on his back there. You could probably just take this and rotate this around. Let's move his socket attachment back over. Actually, let's hit Control Z, Control Z. Let's rotate it first and see if that looks a little bit better. So, staff equip socket. Let's rotate that into position. And then let's take that and drop it down some. And now what should kind of happen is, when he's walking around, that skull staff is just going to be in the pile of all of his other skulls, right? And then when he goes to kick our ass, he's going to reach back and grab that and pull it out and have it in his hand. Right, so that's his staff equip socket for back there. Now we just need to have a spot to stick it in his hand, and this is all his right hand weapons. So we could call that, if we wanted to, we'll just make one. We go up to the right hand, hand R, right click, add socket, and under this I'm going to call this, we'll call it R hand underscore staff. And we're going to preview mesh that. So we add a preview asset, same thing, Orc4, and we get his staff over here, his Orc4 weapon. And now we're going to zoom that out. And when we are holding this, let's hold that like right up in here. Down a little bit. And then see if we can move that under his hand. Whoops. Right hand staff. Trying to get that in there. And you just tweak these out and kind of get them. Whoops! Don't randomly click on stuff like I'm doing. Staff equip. Right hand staff. All right, probably close enough for government work here for what we're doing. Just to show you. Okay, so now we've got an R hand staff value that we need to go and plug into our item for his skeleton, or for his, for the Orc Skull Staff for the equip socket. So equip socket name is now going to be R hand staff. Save that, and let's go take a look at our results here. It's a long ass video, guys. Alright, so see what he did there? Now let's do ourselves a solid. We're going to take our player character and move him back behind these guys. Everything's easier if you're actually looking at it in the right spot. As I zoom off camera. It's always the way. Alright, so we come out, get it back here a little bit so we're not in their detection range. And then if you want to put something on the surface, if you don't have any obstructions, you can just let go of that and hit the end key and it'll put it down on the earth, And these guys here, we can hit control, grab this pile of guys, and let's put them, let's move them in front of him. I want to see him and his staff, And then we hit Alt-P to play this. Oh shit. I got my second player standing in front of him. I'm like, what's he attacking? He's attacking the second player. So we're going to get rid of that socket, or that start position. Now the second player up here. That's funny. We get to see it firsthand. Alright, so now our second player's over here with us. So I think that looks pretty good. When he runs around, he's got that extra skull in there. Right? Looks good to me. Yeah, it looks nice. It's attached on there nice and proper. Skulls everywhere. He sees us. He reaches up and pulls a skull back from the thing, and he comes over and he tries to slam it down on us. Look at that. He taunts the rest of the guys. He says, come on, let's get him, guys. And he comes over and he slams us again. Now, I don't like that, so I kill him. Alright. Now, that's probably enough of all the stuff that we need to worry about for right now. Alright, so hopefully that gives you guys what you're looking for to get started with replicating this and everything. I know I covered a lot of different stuff in there. Pause the screens and let me know if you have some issues. I might come up with a way to share this with you a little bit easier. We might be able to, set this up where you can paste the scripts in and stuff like that. I don't know. I'd have to look at it because half of the time this part works the way I wanted to, but pasting the other stuff in didn't seem to. Oh, excuse me. So hopefully that helps you guys out and get you started with randomizing some things into your game and replicating them onto your multiplayer instance. Again, my name's TC Mabe. Thanks again for watching. And if you have questions, do not hesitate to ask because this is a lot of stuff and I don't mind helping you. All right. Take care and have a great night.